Hello and welcome to This Day in Esoteric Political History. My name is Jody Avirgan. This day, 1909, President William Taft attends a formal dinner, as presidents do. Men sitting at rows of tables, white linen, everyone's wearing fancy gear, tuxes and so forth, waiting to be served. And, well, what is on the menu? According to reports, the centerpiece of the meal is, quote, a possum, crisp and brown. Yes, this was a presidential feat of possum. And this incident sets off a very strange period in American history in which President Taft kind of goes possum crazy. We will get into it. But apparently, as a result of this dinner, the president is infatuated with possums. He and his team come up with an idea to make the possum the kind of de facto mascot of the Taft administration. So let's talk about the very misguided story of Billy Possum and the also deep history of presidents and possums and more. Here, as always, Nicole Hemmer of Vanderbilt and Kellie Carter-Jackson of Wellesley. Hello there.
Also very possum crazy over here. Hello, Jody.
Yeah.
Hello. Hey there.
Now, before we get into this episode proper, I just want to give a shout out to listener Eric, who wrote us a nice email suggesting this, but also the great writer, friend of the show, John Mooallem, has written about this a bunch. He wrote about this story in his really great book, Wild Ones, and then he did it at Pop-Up Magazine, and he did it on 99% Invisible. I think he even did a TED Talk about the thing. So, I mean, we just have to give, just before we get going, we have to do a shout out to John Mooallem, who's really been on this possum beat for a long time. But anyway.
And might just be like 16 possums in a trench coat.
That's
Have
true.
you met him in person?
No, that's true. All right. Well, listeners, maybe you picked up on it, but I could just tell you the divergent enthusiasm for getting into this episode you can hear in the very beginning here.
So we should say that, like, Niki posted a horrendous picture of a possum in our Slack chat, and it infiltrated my subconscious, and I had a horrible dream, a nightmare last night about a possum that was in my kid's room, and I'm like screaming. So I'm not really enthusiastic about talking about possums.
As we'll get into this story, you had a nightmare about possums, as did likely much of America for a couple months in 1909, because possums were on the brain and they were trying to make them a thing. But I actually think we need to start. And we haven't done an episode on this, and we will, but let's do a quick sketch. We need to lay the groundwork of actually where the teddy bear comes from. I feel like that's a key important information here. So does someone want to do the sketch of Teddy Roosevelt, who was Taft's predecessor, and how we got the teddy bear during that administration, because it plays into why we get the possum in the next administration?
There was this moment in the Roosevelt administration. So Roosevelt was known to be a big game hunter. He was somebody who would go to Africa. He was somebody who would hunt elephants and tigers and all of these things. And there's this story about him going out on a hunt and spotting a bear, getting ready to shoot it, and then realizing that the bear was chained up. That it, in fact, had been positioned there so that he could get a kill on this hunt and take the big fur back with him. And instead of shooting, Teddy Roosevelt says, "No, I will not do this. This is not fair. Let us save the bear." And so this becomes like a political cartoon of the time, and it becomes this story that circulates around, and people love it so much that a toy manufacturer makes a stuffed bear in honor of this moment and calls it a teddy bear, or Teddy's bear.
Yeah, and so that's where we get teddy bears from. There's a lot of other details. We'll do an episode on that. But we have this teddy bear thing floating in the air. Now, cut to a few months later, a year or so later, it's the beginning of the Taft administration. He's in the South trying to win up some political support from Southern lawmakers, trying to just make nice. He's had a big fancy dinner. The people putting on the dinner decide to really pull out all the stops and serve what they consider to be a kind of most Southern of dishes. And it is a 18-pound possum, which is basically brought out head to tail. Apparently it has nuts all around it and has one little nut in between its teeth. A possum has 50 teeth.
And they're all razor sharp. Like, these are some pointy
I'm just saying this stuff because I'm just watching how Kellie is reacting to all this.
Yuck. I can't.
But Kellie, Taft, very different from you. Taft is feeling this. He is very into this.
Yeah, I mean, this gesture really is sort of a nod at both black and white Southerners, because black Southerners ate possum, so did white Southerners. It was considered sort of a delicacy, if you will. And so by partaking in this ritual of saying like, hey, I eat possum too, like trying to connect with the local people, this was his way of doing that. But it's just bizarre because there is no way you can compare rescuing like a bear cub to eating a possum.
Notably, Teddy Roosevelt did not eat the bear.
It seems like the most obvious distinct difference between these two stories, as we'll get into, but no one at the time apparently was taking this into account, because instead what happens is Taft eats this possum, really loves it. Apparently, like, a doctor sitting not too far away looks over and it's like, you may want to slow down like, with eating this possum. Like he's
like going
really
for it.
He's going for it. But, his aide, and it becomes like a little story, it's like William Howard Taft, like, really loved the possum. He's got, and his aides start to put two and two together in their heads. And they're like, wait a minute, maybe we can make the possum a thing. And, like every bad idea, it's basically like, well, this thing worked for that other person. Maybe we can just look for our own version of that thing, and it hardly ever works. But that is, in fact, what they try. And they try and basically make the possum the like de facto mascot, right, of Taft, and associate possums with Taft in the way that cute bears were associated with
Oh, man.
Yes, and this was in part like driven by market forces. At the time, there had been a drop-off in the sale of Teddy's bear because Roosevelt was no longer president. So they were like, what can we make for Taft? They seize on this possum, perhaps not recognizing that when it comes to charismatic megafauna, you want things with like big eyes and like little button noses, and you definitely don't want them to have like a naked rat's tail coming out the end. But that's what you get with a possum.
And sharp, pointy teeth.
Maybe less than 30 teeth.
Yes, that's right.
Maybe a dozen teeth, not 50 teeth.
Oh man, I feel like, how when you go up to Chick-fil-A and they have the cows that are like eat more chicken, I feel like there's like a teddy bear that's like eat more possum or something like that. Like
Right.
It's just trying to like, this whole campaign just feels very off to me, and I don't know how you make possums. They're not cuddly, cute creatures. I'm not sure how they taste. I don't know if they taste like chicken or whatever, or if there's like sort of like a yumminess to it that, like is...
Well, it didn't catch on, so that might be a sign.
You're used to hearing my voice on the world, bringing you interviews from around the globe.
And you hear me reporting environment and climate news. I'm Carolyn Beeler.
And I'm Marco Werman. We're now with you hosting The World Together. More global journalism with a fresh new sound.
Listen to The World on your local public radio station and wherever you find your podcasts.
Speaking of kind of like the unreality around it, I mean, there are these kind of stories that Taft circulates that, that he was being served a roast possum and it was still alive and he couldn't get over like the reproachful look that it gave him.
Gosh.
And it's like, you don't have the Teddy Roosevelt magic. No. Talking about the reproachful look that a half-cooked possum gave you when you were trying to eat it is not endearing. It's not a good story.
But this is his advertisement. Yeah. He says, I ate very heartily of it last night, and it did not disturb in the slightest my digestion or my sleep. And I'm like, that's still not a plug.
Now here's a stuffed animal, kids, of this thing. But anyway, so we have to spell it out for folks, it's like Teddy Bear, and then Billy, which is the nickname for William, Possum. And it's just like 1-to-1. We're just going to try and do this again. And, part of what I can't figure out here, though, is how much, at least for a small period of time, this is a genuine
people go for it.
Or a fad or whatever. There are reports that, like, people would be bringing like possums in cages to give as gifts to Taft when he was like out in different parts of the country. They were making stuffed animals around this. There were posters, there were write-ups, and political cartoons,
songs.
and it sort of was sort of capturing. And there were songs. Yeah, there's some amazing songs floating around. So it was capturing something for a fairly brief period of time. But I guess the question is, was it just sort of doomed because of all the sort of built-in differences that we discussed?
I mean, there are differences not only in the cuteness of the animals involved. I know that's subjective, but also in Taft versus Roosevelt. I mean, Roosevelt was this larger-than-life, charismatic figure who in many ways transforms the presidency because of the way that he develops his bully pulpit and creates a platform and an agenda in a way that presidents hadn't done before. And Taft doesn't necessarily have that same appeal. He's not as out there. He's not as engaging. He's not somebody that the public falls in love with. Yeah,
I think that's a big part of it. And the charisma is also huge. I think the fact that he was symbolically trying to woo Black voters and then at the same time basically saying, actually, I'm really not going to do anything to push for civil rights or anything that seems resonant of a Black agenda. People paid attention to that. So nothing he did felt sincere. And so it doesn't last. I think it's a trend that pops up quickly. But by Christmas time, the whole Billy Possum thing is like, And I mean, that's when you make your sales, Christmas time. But like...
they can't even make it. Yeah, they can't even make it to Christmas. And moreover, I mean, there's also an interesting context here of like, toys are really changing at this point, right? There's more like mechanical toys, and so just a simple stuffed animal. Even it was wildly popular a couple years earlier, but maybe that's less popular now. All of these are very interesting theories, and history is a very complex thing. I also think that at some fundamental level, he ate the freaking thing, and your origin story cannot be about a thing that you ate. And so I think that has a pretty big part.
It plays a big role. And in fact, he's so obsessed with possums. He actually has a possum instead of a turkey for Thanksgiving dinner. And at some point, you just want to be like, Taft, stop trying to make possum.
Stop trying to make it happen. It's not a thing. It's not a thing.
No, and you could see people around him just sort of like staring awkwardly into their glass as he tells the story or brings out another possum or whatever. But one interesting wrinkle here, back to Teddy Roosevelt. You know that bear that he rescued? It was killed.
No.
So apparently... what actually happens in that story is he refuses to kill it, and he basically says something like, you guys take care of it, and he walks away. And what does the rest of his hunting party do? They kill the bear, and apparently they ate off of it for the next 2 weeks.
They ate the bear anyway. That's shocking.
And it was completely lost to history that they actually killed this thing. And I don't think Teddy Roosevelt was any sort of humanitarian or animal lover, but it is this interesting thing about how things can get spun. And so maybe it's it's just about what story do you craft, but then it's also like a possum is, you're not going to be able to tell that kind of story about a possum.
These sort of apocryphal stories do not, I think about, it's like the teddy bear, it's the possum. It's the cherry tree that George Washington cut down. You know what I mean? No one stands a chance. Maybe the turkeys that get pardoned every year or whatever, but we still eat turkey.
Yeah. There's no hope.
I would like to see a possum pardon, though. Everybody would be like, nah, he did it, and kill it.
I did hint, and we won't get too far into it, but there is a lot of other interesting history about possums as pets. Apparently Benjamin Harrison had 2 possums as pets, Mr. Reciprocity and Mr. Protection. Although then also some historians believe that he actually ate those too. And so who knows?
Oh God!
Who knows? But. Anyway.
Real blurred lines between pets and food here. I'm kind of uncomfortable.
Yes, I think. Well,
Nala's over here kind of I don't know about this guy. Stop talking about eating your pets.
I know. This feels very messed up. Very, very messed up. I just, Can we just plant gardens?
Kellie's going vegetarian based on this episode.
Look, I'm just saying, no one's seen Socks the cat in a long time, or that Obama dog. I haven't seen, so you never know.
Oh gosh.
No. Okay, Kellie.
It's bad.
Should we just end your nightmare here? Should we end this episode? Stop talking about possums.
Seriously, so I can sleep well at night with no indigestion or nightmares.
That's what did it for Taft. This is sort of a piece with the episode we did about rats, and I appreciate you gutting through both of those. So, yes. Nicole Hammer, thanks to you as always.
Thank you, Jody.
And Kellie Carter-Jackson, thanks to you.
My pleasure.
Some eat early and some eat soon. On, do it on. Some like possum and some like coon. On, do it on. That possum just the thing for me. On, do it on. Oh, Rattler's got another apple tree. On, do it on. Oh, come and possum, come and possum children. Come and possum children. How come do it on.
Radiotopia.